Armenians, as all of you, or most of you know, that this is the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. And my father was a survivor of that. And it means a great deal to me because of everything that happened, otherwise I wouldn't have been born. And I had the good fortune to grow up with my grandparents and my great-grandmother and experience all the years that, how they came to settle in this new land. And this has happened with almost everybody in this room, I'm sure, from every country that one imagines. Each country has had its difficulties, and look at the poor people right now in Syria. I mean, it's just so tragic when people have to go through these miserable experiences. It's just unfortunate, but it keeps happening, no matter, we just don't seem to learn. But I'm so pleased that, I'm so happy to have been born. I feel so lucky. And maybe if it hadn't happened, I would have been in Armenia someplace, who knows? But I'm so happy to be in this great country. So maybe ultimately some good things come out of these tragedies, who knows? How to look at it. There are many ways of considering it. But if you bear with me, now most of you, I think all of you have this program with the pictures on it. You all have this? Okay. And this one, the single one, you all have this? Well, the single one has the correct order of the recital program. The one on the back of this picture one is not correct. So this is the one that has the correct order. The photos are ones that I took from actual pictures and photos, and I'd like to just say a few words about those. First of all, well, let's see, we'll start with this, the one that's this one that you have on your program that has the thing, okay? Now, this is a picture of my father's mother. On this side, my father's father, and this was my father's mother, and this little boy here between the mother and the father is my father. And the one all the way to this side was my aunt, who became my godmother, Anais. And these two children died. My grandmother had to bury them on the side of the road, and they were on these marches. This was the mother of my my mother's father. This was my great-grandmother on my father's side. In any case, she also was shot because she couldn't swim. Someplace they told her she had to swim through this thing, and she couldn't swim, so they shot her. So out of this photo, my father's father was killed, shot. The men were all told they were going to be going to another village where they would meet their families later on. And they were never seen again, except floating down the river and having been shot. So out of this photograph, the only ones that survived were my grandmother, my father, and his older sister. So that's sort of, and these are people that I grew up with. So they're not just somebody I read about or heard about. I lived with them. And, you know, my grandmother, you'll bear with me, these are special. How many Armenians are there in this room? You probably all have similar stories. My grandmother had a big pile of records, those 78 recordings when I was little. And I used to spend most of my life as a child with one grandparent or the other. So they spoke Armenian, so Armenian was my first spoken language. And I was hearing all the time this music. She would have the records that one of these players that drops, one finishes, another one drops, and so on. She would listen to those all day long. So I was saturated in all this Eastern music. Most of it was Turkish, because they were in Turkey. But I don't know, I just loved the music. We used to have, on holidays, always the families got together, and my cousins played the oud, and the violin, and the clarinet, and the gombak, and we used to dance, you know, in the rooms, and it was always folk music. And folk music is the soul of the people of each country. And I was telling Diane Andersen, who's playing today, that she's a wonderful, wonderful pianist and a teacher, a concert artist, and she was giving a lecture in Budapest on a lecture recital on Bartók. And I still remember how she talked about Bartók, and it just inspired me to realize how important Bartók did very much like what Komidas did. He went through the villages and collected the tunes that the people were singing. And Komidas wrote it down by hand the best he could. But Bartók, yes?
Diane, you may want to explain who Komidas is in terms of the silence.
Okay. I was going to do that later, but
Oh,
I'll do it as long as
sorry.
Komidas, or Komidas, was, he's sort of the music figure among Armenians. He was a priest, and he was an ethnomusicologist, trained in ethnomusicology, which means the music of various countries and so on. So this was his specialty, and so he put them down as best he could, and many, many, many composers had used what he's written down and made their own music out of those melodies. And I've done the same, which I will explain as the time goes by with some of these pieces. So this folk music was inspired by Bartók. I mean, my interest, let's say, in actually making myself experience the music in the way that I wanted to share it. I write a lot of teaching music for students, and I want kids to be able to play pieces that are not too difficult, but that are beautiful, have beautiful melodies and things like that. So I've written much, much music like that has an Armenian flavor. It's my own. It's my own melody. But it's Armenian because it's my language. It's the first language that I spoke. So that's one of the pictures. On my mother's side, this is a portrait of my mother that was painted by the wife of Nelson Chase, who was a famous artist in Belmont. And he was also a professor at MIT. And my dad had a drugstore in Belmont Center many years ago. And I used to work on the soda fountain there. And this Nelson Chase used to come into the store quite a bit and ask my father for money because he was an alcoholic and he needed money. And my dad said, look, I want to give you money, but I don't want you to go and spend it on alcohol. So he said, I will give you a photograph of my wife, and I would be so happy if you'd like to paint a picture of her. I will pay for it. So he did, but he gave it to his wife, and his wife painted the picture. But it's nevertheless, it's special. It has a special meaning. And speaking of my mother, I owe her all this musical talent that I have, because she was a fabulous violinist, and she was a performer, a real prima donna, the opposite of me. She fixed herself every day. She loved to be on the stage. She really enjoyed it, but she was from a poor family, and they could not afford to promote her. She barely had lessons, but she still excelled as a violinist. She gave many, many concerts, but not outside of the local, but she loved it more than anything. So I grew up listening to her practice all the time, and giving concerts and hearing her play with the orchestra. So, and then she tried, I wanted to play the violin, but she tried to teach me, and it was impossible. But my little sister, she got my little sister, and my little sister was not quite as stubborn as I was, and she worked with my little sister, and she forced her to practice every day, and sat with her, and made sure she did things the right way. She was very obedient. I wasn't. And little by little, when she was 6, she was already playing with orchestra concertos. She was a child prodigy. And she's a performer like my mother. And now I'm happy to say that she has a string quartet that she plays with, that they give concerts all over. And also she's doing duo concerts with Miriam Gargarian and Donato. And the two of them are giving concerts wherever they can. So if you want a concert to be given by either of them, they're very eager. They're wonderful performers together. I'm so happy that they're working together because they're both wonderful musicians. So, that's, I have my mother to thank. And let's take a look at her parents. Her parents, her father came over before the genocide. He came over before there was another revolution before that. He came earlier to this country with his brother, who wanted to come to go to college here. He was much younger than his brother, but he said, please take me with you. I'll get a job, and I'll help you to go to college, and so on. So they came to this country together, the two of them, and my grandfather opened a tailor shop. He was a tailor. He made suits, men's suits. And his brother went to college. Eventually, he was at Harvard University. He graduated from Harvard University. I have his records, his grade records. And so they were here before, and then came this, again, it was it was a massacre. And my mother's family, my mother's grandmother and that family, they had a farm, and when the whole thing burned down, everybody burned. There were 7 children, and only 3 survived. And the mother and the father burned to death too. So they were left that way. So my grandmother on my mother's side was sent to an orphanage. And at the orphanage, as she was growing up, my grandfather was in this country by that time, on that side, the one that had come with his brother to go to Harvard. So he wanted to marry an Armenian, so he wrote to this orphanage and said, send his picture. He's quite handsome. He sent his picture and he said, look, I want to marry an Armenian. Somebody likes my picture? Tell her to come and I'll marry her. Anyway, I don't know what it is. Yeah, I'll tell them that, but it's in the picture. Well, anyway. Well, here's a picture of the 3 of them. Okay, that was him after they got married. That was the one that sent the picture and married her. And that was my mother's mother. And that was my mother's father, when he was young. And that was my mother's brother. He was born before she was born. So that's a picture of his family. And it's an interesting thing that so many Armenians, and my husband was Persian, so many of the Eastern people used British names, or either British names or from the king, from the, what do you call it, the royalty. Anyway, they chose, or from the Bible. Now my father's name was Peter. My mother's name was Isabel. My grandmother's name was Elizabeth. These are all queens. My father's mother was Takui, which means queen. So they were named after the queens and things like that. which is fascinating, I think. And my husband's name was Alfred, and his brother's name was Albert, and George. So they're all British influenced. They all look to Britain with great respect. Anyway, and the Bible. Those two were the strong things in their lives. So, and this again was a picture of my father's mother and father. This one was killed, and this one was when she was very young. Probably before, I think it could have been a marriage picture. Could have been that. So I'm sure you're very bored with all this, but I feel like it's important, just from the standpoint of all of you, as I said, having experience, or many of you having experienced the same kinds of stories, the same thing. This is a picture that Nicole Bernstein, who's a wonderful photographer, artist, took of my father. She made this beautiful portrait of him, and it's really very special. Stand up, Nicole. She's a wonderful photographer. Photos of the Carnegie Hall concert that I have that are very special. She does portraits, a lot of wonderful portraits. So, and now this book, my story, is when my dad was 84, and he had told us so many stories about what had happened. I said, Daddy, I'm so afraid I'm going to get things wrong, I'm going to forget things. Please, will you write down these things so that we'll have them in the letter, so we will have it correct. So we gave him my son a whole computer, and he didn't stop. My mother said, he never gets out of the chair. The memories kept flooding back. And so he wrote this, and he was not a novelist in any way. His spelling was terrible, his grammar was terrible. I don't care. I said, just write. So he did. And so this is a wonderful, in his own words, I did have the spelling fixed a bit, and the grammar a little bit. But this is his explanation of what he experienced. And remember, he was only 4 or 5 when this happened. But he had tremendous memory about so much of it. And, and I sent this to Elie Wiesel. And Elie Wiesel wrote my father a beautiful letter, saying the courage that it took to write this book. And so many people have had these stories, but a lot of them have written, but a lot of them haven't. So it's important for us to know about these things, because we're so lucky in this country. We take so much for granted. We're so, So I just wanted to say that thing. Now, I think I said pretty much all I need to say about that. Now, I will also say this, because most of you know that I do not play the piano anymore. I've performed for 100 years. I did go to Juilliard as a pianist, but I've never enjoyed performing. I love teaching. This is what I love more than anything else. And but these little teaching pieces, but they're not teaching pieces, they're little pieces that are not difficult to play. They're very Armenian flavored, and I wrote them for various reasons. And this is, again, when I write a piece, I don't just write a piece. This is something that motivates me to do it. And the performers, all of the performers on this program are very special to me. They've come from distances that are unreal. But I'll start out, I'll do them in the order that these are people who came from distances. Well, Phyllis, Lehrer, and Anna Bronstein have come all the way here from Princeton. They fly to, I don't speak English. They flew in this morning, one of them flew in, or they both flew in. Anyway, and they're flying back tonight because they teach. They both teach at Westminster Choir College. They're both superb pianists and artists and teachers. And they played this Mosaic many, many years ago. They practically, almost the first performance of it was theirs. And they recorded it, and they've played this so many places. It's very special that they came to play it today. The Mosaic is again a piece that I wrote to explain or show my heritage. So it has in it some folk tunes that I remember from my youth. You'll recognize maybe when you hear, those of you that are Armenian, some of the old folk tunes, a couple of them. And it ends with the Toccata, which was my father's favorite dance. He used to do it, you know, it has this, I can't do it because my knees aren't good. But it's a wonderful Armenian dance, and the Armenians love it. So I put that at the end of the Mosaic. Now, Diane Andersen has come all the way from Belgium. And this is amazing to me. She has done this many, many times to perform my music. And I just feel so honored to have such wonderful friends that do these things. I can't even begin to tell you. And I just want to say these things. Again, apologizing for talking too much, but it's important for me to say it. If it hadn't been for Phyllis Lehrer, I probably never would have written any music. Sorry, I got too emotional. But Phyllis and I studied, well, Phyllis went to Juilliard after I did. She's younger than I am. And then when she came to Boston, she was looking for a teacher, and I had a very good teacher, Lily Dumont, and I introduced them, and they hit it off, and so Phyllis began studying with her, and so on. So I've had many, many years of friendship together, and before I was married, and before she had any children. And so we've had a lifetime together. And Phyllis, I remember she was on sabbatical in England, and she wrote to me, she said, well, I'm giving a concert when I come back at Lincoln Center at Merkin Hall, and I'm playing a whole program of toccatas and fantasies. I want you to write me either a toccata or a fantasy. And I said, what? She said, I want you to write me either a toccata or a fantasy. I said, I'm not a composer. She said, do it. I said, I can't do it. I'm not, this is silly. This is a debut concert. This is your career is at stake. I'm going to make a fool out of you or myself. She said, just do it. So she wouldn't let go. So I said, look, I'm going to try. But you have to promise me that if it isn't up to par, just because you're my friend, I don't want you to play it and ruin your career. So I thought, oh my God. So I tried writing a piece that I used a 12-tone system, which it gave me a freedom. Many of you know what the 12-tone system is, that Schoenberg is the one who brought to most people's attention. But it's a wonderful opportunity to free yourself from tonality, from the gravity. So it gave me a sense of freedom. I didn't have to feel that I had to do a particular thing. It's like being an abstract painter. You just do what you want. Doesn't matter what it looks like. You just go with your feelings. And so I wrote this 12-tone fantasy. And I wrote it, and then I was scared to death that it was awful, and I called a very good composition teacher. I said, look, I'm an old lady, and I've never written a piece before. I've written this piece. I need something to tell me if it's worthy of being played or not. Long story short, he said, yes, do it. So I gave it to Phyllis. She performed it absolutely beautifully, and the New York Times gave it a very good review. And I thought, oh my God, this is incredible. But it never would have happened. I thought, well, if I can write one piece, maybe I can write another one. So it started me thinking more seriously about actually writing music. And I've written well over 200 pieces by now. And they're certainly not Beethoven or anything like that, but they're pieces that have expressed who I am and what I love and so on. And so I feel very thankful to have had that stimulus to do things. And then so many of my wonderful artist friends have said, write a piece for me. Diane has commissioned how many pieces for me? I know she write me a sonata. A sonata? Yes, write me a sonata. But just do it. Write me a concerto. I said, concerto? Again, there's so many pieces that have been written because of being encouragement of my wonderful friends, many of whom are here today. So I'm so grateful to them for the opportunity to express myself with music. Now, I think I've spoken enough. So I'm going to begin with these little Armenian, I've never played on this piano before, so we will all try it out. I've never played on it. This is a set of pieces called Eastern Tales. And as I said, many of them were written for a particular purpose. And Phyllis's grandchildren have been, with her son, has traveled all over the world. And Phyllis has played my music literally all over the world. And so when they were in Uzbekistan, or they were in, I don't remember, Georgia, different places, I did write a few of so they're Eastern in flavor because the kids were there. So some of them were for her grandchildren and so on, and for other Armenian children that were born, my nieces or nephews and so on. So I'll just play a few of these. playing a great deal, and she's a remarkable woman. And she came, and I arranged for master classes with many students of hers while she was here, and it was just great to hear. So I just wrote this little piece as a token of my admiration for her. So it's called Thank You Notes. What, if you think of music, any composer that has written a piece #5, what do you think of right away? lot of my music, since the beginning, I start out with that kind of a rhythm, not even consciously. It was da 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 dee, da whatever, da 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 something. With these three, whether I got it from Beethoven innately, I don't know. But somehow it's in so many of my pieces. So I thought, okay, but you know, this is okay. So the figural presence is the number 5. Then the Armenian figure that is most prominent in music is komitas, or gomitas, however you want to say it. So komitas is written, so many composers have taken gomitas' melodies and done beautiful things with them. It is absolutely beautiful music. We all know these pieces and love them. So I thought, well, why can't I take one of his tunes, and I'm Armenian, and I can do my own thing with it too. So I did. I took 2 of my favorite ones. And Karoon means spring. And it's a very beautiful poem. I won't go into it. It's kind of an emotional poem. But it's a love story. And it's a sad love story. It should be spring, should be happy, but this is a sad love story. And then another one that's a favorite of mine is the Song of the Partridge, the Gakavi, Yerke. It's the song of a partridge, the sound of a partridge. And the partridge is a special tree among bird among Armenians. And then, the time I wrote this piece was when things were at their worst in Iraq. And we were all just agonized over what was happening there. And it was so similar, again, kinds of things that we experienced. And so I thought, you know, why must there be war? Why must there be war? 5 words. Okay, so the last movement, and this is, I've asked Kathy to do this, but it's not something she really wants to do, and I don't blame her. I won't do it in a performance because it's too upsetting. But it begins, the last movement begins with 5 really harsh blasts of arm clusters, saying, why must there be war? With the pedal on, and just all the horrors that we think of when we think of war. And then the last movement is a collage of all the other four movements. So again, the piece has 5 movements, which is unusual. There aren't too many sonatas that have 5. But being figural presence, okay, 5 movements. So that's what's behind this piece. Now, the thing that I didn't even mention was it's called the Kiss of Peace. Well, that is from the Armenian liturgy of the Ekmanian. There are 2 different ones that are most popularly used. I didn't even know what it was. I just remember as a child going to church on holidays, and every time this beautiful tune would come, I loved it. I didn't understand what the Armenian was. I didn't know what it was about. I just loved that tune. So one day I went to the Armenian church, I asked the organist, I hummed it. I said, what is this I'm humming? She said, oh, that's the Kiss of Peace. I said, wow, that's perfect. So what happens with that Kiss of Peace in the ceremony, you turn to the person to your right and you kiss them on the cheek, or you hug them, or you shake hands and wish them peace and goodwill. So it's a very special thing, this Kiss of Peace. And the Ekmanian one, the tune that goes with it, is very beautiful. And so I used that in the symphony that I wrote, and I wanted to use it also. So that's the main theme of this sonata. And it starts da 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 da. So it starts that way. And so I've made a couple of little quotes in there of Beethoven, because again, it's related in my mind to that. So these are some things that may help you to listen to the music. Thank you.